Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Cole, the 2025 New Hampshire Association of Realtors president. Thank you all for joining me for our Spring Brokers Forum. We're very excited to be joined by Charlie Lee, Senior Counsel and Director of Legal Affairs at the National Association of Realtors, along with our own legal counsel, Matt Johnson, and CEO Bob Quinn. Thanks again for being here, everyone. And I'll now turn the floor over to National Association of Realtors Senior Counsel and Director of Legal Affairs, Charlie Lee. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Susan, and good morning to you all. It is so good to be here. It's really a privilege and honor to be able to um, join you and to be able to share this information with you. I hope that you will find it helpful. So to kick it off, let me go ahead and share my screen. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to provide you an overview of the new MLS policy and talk about just the process in which this decision, came from. And so first, just to start, remember that the National Association of Realtors regularly evaluates its policies and governing documents. And MLS policies are certainly one of those things that it will, review and invite and welcome input from our members and stakeholders. And the goal is always to ensure that the MLS policies are working in the best way in positioning our members to be able to best serve the consumers while also being able to reduce any sort of legal risk. Now, the clear cooperation policy certainly has drawn a lot of attention, for quite some time. And with this policy, NAR wanted to be sure that it was thoughtful in its overview or in its review of the policy to ensure that the policy was working in the way that it was intended when it was enacted. And so it was a very detailed review where it, solicited a lot of feedback. It prompted a lot of feedback from members and stakeholders across the industry. And NAR took a very, deliberate process in which in each step, it interacted and it engaged the MLS advisory board, MLS leaders, brokerage leaders, association executives, and it also leaned on the thoughts and the expertise of fair housing experts, legal experts, and business and policy experts as well. And so NAR weighed a wide range of perspectives from those who believe that the clear cooperation was working, fine in the way that it currently as it existed. And then for those who thought that there needed to be more flexibility, and then there are others who thought that maybe the clear cooperation policy needed to be repealed. And so NAR, as a part of its process, weighed all these wide-ranging perspectives. And so what I can tell you is that after that extensive interactive, process, the decision was made to come up with a balanced outcome. And as a part of that balanced outcome, as you can see in the slide, and as you know already, since this is not necessarily new, the clear cooperation policy remains unchanged, and it is in full effect. And the clear cooperation policy will continue to require MLS participants to submit their listing to the MLS within one business day of public marketing. Now, in addition to the clear cooperation policy, the decision was made to enact a new MLS policy that provides home sellers with additional choice and flexibility. And this policy is called the multiple listing options for sellers. So what you see on the screen is the policy language, and it is, as you can see, it consists of three components. First is it reiterates that office exclusive listings remain an option. The office exclusive listings is an option that pre-existed the clear cooperation policy, and in fact, it is reflected in the NAR antitrust compliance policy. The delayed marketing exempt listing, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is another option that is available for home sellers, wherein which they can decide, to be able to take advantage of more tailored marketing of their property. And then the last piece is just the disclosure requirements that a home seller must receive when considering these different options to ensure that they have that full understanding of the benefits and also those things that they would be foregoing by pursuing one of these options, and to document and confirm that it is the home seller's understanding and comfort, and that it is their decision when they decide to go with one of these options. So with the delayed marketing exempt listing, it is a new exempt listing category. And with this option, what it does is it allows the home seller to instruct their listing broker to have their property listing delayed in the marketing that is provided through IDX and syndication. And so this delayed period is set locally by the multiple listing service. And we'll talk a little bit more about what exactly that means. But with this delayed marketing option, the home seller is saying that they don't want their property to be marketed and advertised by other participants through their IDX display, or for those that are non-participants to be able to advertise it through syndication. And so that is something the home seller is instructing their listing broker to do, so that the listing broker can decide how it is that they're going to provide tailored marketing for their home seller during that delayed time period. Now, the other thing that is important to note about a delayed marketing exempt listing is that it is a listing that is filed within the multiple listing service, and that others are able to know about that listing and to be able to share that information about that listing with their consumers. And so, as you can see here, what we say is that when a delayed marketing exempt listing is filed within the MLS, the other brokers and other agents are able to take their consumers to tour their property, to be able to share information about that property with their consumers. It's just that they are not able to use an IDX feed or a syndication feed in order to be able to do it, but they have all the other mechanisms that are available through the multiple listing service to be able to provide those types of services and information to their consumers. And again, remember, when you are pursuing this option, when the home seller says that they want a delayed marketing exempt listing, that needs to be confirmed through a signed disclosure. And so the disclosure is there to affirm the seller's informed choice in that this is something that they believe makes the most sense for them. Now, the delayed marketing period, if you look at the policy language itself, you'll see that it is completely blank. And that is because NAR is not setting the delay window. Each multiple listing service will have to go through the process in deciding what delayed marketing period is going to make the most sense for their marketplace. And so the policy language says that the MLS has unfettered local discretion, meaning that it can decide anywhere from 0 to anything above 0, and then it can also structure it where it's a minimum, a maximum, or a range. The deadline to implement the policy is September 30th of this year. Office exclusives, that is an option that is reflected in this new MLS policy. However, this is an option that pre-exists the clear cooperation policy. It pre-exists this policy, except the new MLS policy just kind of reiterates that office exclusives remains a choice for a home seller to consider if that's something that they think makes sense for them. So for example, if they need that privacy, or if they are concerned about any sensitive information related to their home or about themselves, this is something that they can talk to their listing broker about. And so if it is that they want to go with an office exclusive listing, there is the disclosure requirement. And that disclosure is to ensure that the home seller has that understanding about what it means to make their property an office exclusive listing. The clear cooperation rules still apply. So as I said earlier, it is not repealed and it is not modified. That means that MLS participants and subscribers understand that any listing that is publicly marketed must be filed within 1 business day into the MLS for others to be able to know about the property and be able to share information about that property. And this is something that you need to have, that you need to include as a part of the conversation with your consumers. Delayed marketing exempt listings are available in the MLS, so it already meets the requirements of the clear cooperation policy. And since the policy has been enacted, a lot of people have been confused to think that a delayed marketing exempt listing is a new type of office exclusive. And so I just can't reiterate enough that the delayed marketing exempt listing is not an office exclusive. It is a type of exempt listing, but it is something that is in the MLS that others are able to know about and share information about. So it meets the requirements of CCP. Now, one thing that I will add is that as a part of what NAR has decided in responding to all the feedback that it received from the different stakeholders, is that NAR has issued clarifying guidance about one-to-one communications. And so if you have an office exclusive, the listing brokerage is able to have one-to-one broker-to-broker communications that won't trigger the requirements of CCP. This means that the communication must be limited to person-to-person, so it has to be one-to-one. It cannot be one-to-many or many-to-many. And the other thing that brokers must remember is that this must be done pursuant to the seller's interest. And so if the seller is saying that I need an office exclusive because I have privacy concerns and I don't want that public marketing, or I don't want that broad marketing exposure that would be provided through the multiple listing service, then the listing broker has to account for that and be sure that when they do have one-on-one communications, they're not in any way betraying that interest. And so please do check out facts.realtor. If you go to facts.realtor, you will find a list of FAQs. We've got different resources and an infographic, all to assist you in being able to understand how this policy works, to be able to have that important conversation with your consumers. We also have videos that are available, so please do check that out. And if you do have any other questions, certainly you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to take them during this time as well.
Okay. Jennifer Vashon and Julia Sirios is on deck.
So I'm just trying to understand the clarity with regard to the multi-brokerage communications piece, because we're talking about this being a office exclusive. If it's an office exclusive and a brokerage is asking me from a completely different brokerage for my agent directory so that they can individually send the listing to each of my agents, I feel like that's not what this was intended to do. It's not truly an office exclusive at that point. You have the multi-brokerage communications will trigger, but I think they're thinking that, and my understanding would be that if they're sending any of our agents a listing, that's not an office exclusive anymore. Can you give some clarity to that?
Sure. So what I would say is that the communication, remember, is got to be between a person to person, broker to broker, or agent to agent, or a mix between those two. But it really needs to be limited to those two people as to that office exclusive listing. And that's because in that scenario, the home seller is telling the listing broker that they can have that type of communication about that property for the home seller to consider what may be out there in the marketplace, as their property is an office exclusive listing. It does not mean that the listing broker is authorizing the person on the receiving end of that conversation to be able to go ahead and market that property broadly, because that would go against the home seller's interest. And so It is something that does expand it a little bit in terms of how it is that you would typically operate with an office exclusive listing, but it is also limited to ensuring that the home seller is still able to maintain their interest in having that listing within their listing brokerage, but also considering what other information that they may factor into their decision-making process, where they may decide as a result of the information they get through that communication to change their office exclusive listing to a listing that is no longer office exclusive and broadly marketed through the MLS.
So is it really an office exclusive anymore? I guess that's where because it's not exclusive just to our office at that point. It's being sent to all of the agents. So should it
Well,
really?
it's not being sent to all agents. So I guess that's what I have to be clear about. Remember, so you can have those types of communications, but it does not authorize people to be able to come and tour the property, to be able to make offers on the property without it triggering CCP. So it's really just about letting them know that there is this office exclusive listing, and then they can go ahead and provide some relevant information that the home seller can consider. However, it is not something where it allows a listing brokerage to interact with different brokerages or to be able to have that type of marketing that we would consider to be public marketing.
Julia and Adam, you're on deck.
So I guess I just want to follow up with what Jennifer was just saying. So this is very confusing, and I'm slightly concerned about the liability that I have as a listing agent in trying to explain this entire process to a seller. It's not clear. I'm not sure why it came about. And I don't know if this is enough for me to explain to a seller, like what our purpose is here. And if you
Sure.
could just talk about that.
I'd be happy to address that. So Julia, remember, this is where the home seller is saying, I want to have communication in a one-to-one format outside of the listing brokerage. It is not something that's automatic. It's all prompted by what the home seller's interests are. I think the other thing is just that when the home seller is considering what options are available, it doesn't necessarily have to be an office exclusive. You have other things that you can utilize in accommodating the home seller. So for example, if they're comfortable with the listing being in the MLS, but they want maybe some level of privacy, they have the ability to keep it off the internet that the MLS would be able to accommodate the home seller with. So I think in having that conversation with the home seller, one, I think it's got to be predicated on what does the home seller need? And then in terms of the one-to-one communication, if the home seller is saying that, okay, I'm working with you, Julia, and maybe Julia, you tell them, okay, we can do an office exclusive listing, but I don't know. Maybe my office is not as big as some of the other brokerages. And as a result, we may have to resort to a one-to-one communication. And that one-to-one communication is really about giving the home seller more information that they can think through as their home is on the marketplace as an office exclusive listing. So it just provides an extra layer of flexibility. But the home seller understands that it is still limited to your listing brokerage. It does not mean that you are now interacting with those outside of the brokerage. It is just that if the home seller wants to interact with those outside of the brokerage, where they're going to come and tour the property, they're going to consider offers, where they're going to negotiate any sort of offers about that property, then they'll have to make a decision. And that decision will be, okay, I no longer want it as an office exclusive listing. And I do want to be able to invite others to come and look at the property and to compete for that property outside of the listing brokerage.
Okay, I'm just not sure what the advantage is for the seller to just do an exclusive, but I see what you're saying. The privacy piece is important. And I guess that's how you would start the conversation, maybe.
Right.
But yeah.
And I think that's the thing. It's just that it isn't to say that this is something that has to be done. It's all dependent on what's happening in your marketplace, the conditions and circumstances that your home seller is in. What I can tell you is that in other marketplaces, we hear that home sellers they need that type of flexibility because they're worried about, someone coming and robbing their home because people know that maybe they're a celebrity or a professional athlete and they are being targeted for those reasons. And then there are others who've got prized possessions that they just worry about. And so as a result, they need extra level of privacy. And so again, I just think that it's important for all of us to remember these things have to be prompted by the home seller's interests and needs and not by any other sort of interest.
Fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam and Mary Jo, you're on deck.
I just wanted to give an example and see if I'm in the right in doing it. So if I have a listing coming on and I know that there's some agents in my town that may have buyers for the property, I can alert them to the fact that this listing is coming.
Yes, in a one-to-one fashion, yes.
And yeah, so I just call somebody I do business with all the time to say, I know you're working with Mary and Joe last May. Are they still in the market? I've got a property that's coming that might fit the bill.
Right.
It allows for that old-fashioned negotiation of working with other brokerages to try and get something sold. But I understand that the seller has to know if they don't hit MLS, they don't know the true market value potentially. So with the delayed marketing, so New Hampshire hasn't adopted anything. So that's probably a different question. But for Clear Corporation, if a property isn't in MLS, I can call a broker and say, hey, I've got a listing coming that you may have a buyer for, even though it's not 24 hours before I'm listing the property.
Yeah, so Adam, I generally agree with what you're saying. I just want to unpack a few things there because you mentioned CCP, delayed marketing, and then we're talking about the one-to-one. So remember, delayed marketing example listing is not an office exclusive. So that is something where the home seller is saying, I want tailored marketing, meaning Adam, I want you to decide how it is that this property is going to be marketed during the delayed time period, and others can advertise it through IDX and syndication. So that's the delayed marketing example listing. And then once it's in the MLS, you can communicate about it however it is that you think is suitable for the home seller. Now, if it's an office exclusive listing, that's where the one-to-one does come into play. So it's not in the MLS. People aren't able to interact with it, except you can communicate with them in a one-to-one fashion. And so in that scenario, if you've got an office exclusive listing and maybe you've got, someone that you've worked with successfully in the past, and you say, hey, I've got this office exclusive listing. Maybe there's information that I can share with my seller that they can consider. And that other broker says, I would have someone that's interested in that property and would be able to, I don't know, maybe provide a serious offer for that. The home seller then has to make the decision how they want to respond to that information. And in that decision, they would say, yes, I want to interact with them. I want them to come and see the property. So now I'm going to decide it's no longer being office exclusive listing. Or they say, you know what, I still have privacy concerns. Thanks for that information, Adam. But for the time being, I'm going to keep it as an office exclusive listing.
My biggest challenge is like we list some nice properties and wanting to get the right photos for the right first impression. And some that, I mean, this spring has been awful. We've got rain every day and it's freezing outside. So we're delaying and postponing and rescheduling photos. And it's killing me because I know there's buyers in the area. So what's the solution for that? Like walk me through what I should be doing from a listing agreement standpoint, either case today or what it's going to be.
Well, so I think in that scenario, I can't tell you how it is that you should make these certain business decisions, but in terms of the choice and flexibility that the MLS can provide you is that with the delayed marketing example listing, you may decide that, okay, for those conditions that you described, the home is not ready to be publicly advertised by others. And so as a result, I'm going to have it as a DML. And during that DML period, maybe I'm going to wait for that right moment to get those photographs and things. And then I will publicly advertise it on my website and maybe other places that I think is going to be advantageous for the home seller. So you can decide when in which you're going to allow others to be able to publicly see the property in terms of what's available online. The other option is that some MLSs have what's called a coming soon. And so coming soon, I think, in these different MLSs, people have said, works very similar to like a DML. So I think that's another thing that could be considered. And there are other statuses that the MLS could provide as well. So again, I just think it's about, thinking through what options are available and then working with your home seller to decide what's going to make the most sense for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Jo, and then Heather, you're on deck.
So it's very confusing, this. So you're saying if this is an office exclusive listing, and whether I'm a small company or a big company, I can take and say, okay, well, we're gonna call another broker, and I can call another broker of a larger company, or say I'm two larger companies, and I can call another broker of a large company and say, oh, we have this, which, the agents in the larger companies. So now you're opening that up to two different larger companies. Is that the purpose of this?
No.
Like, I don't understand why because if you go broker to broker, then the broker is going to talk to their agents, correct? I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's going to happen. So what is the purpose? I just don't understand the purpose of that. The one-on-one.
Right. And so Mary Jo, one, I can't stress enough, it's got to be pursuant and in accordance with the seller's interest. If the seller is saying, I need privacy, I want privacy, I want to limit how many people know about this property, then you have to make sure the home seller gets that. And when you engage in one-to-one communications, you have to be sensitive of that and mindful of that. And so if the home seller is saying, okay, Mary Jo, we have this office exclusive listing, but maybe I don't mind you having that private conversation with someone else to think through what else might be out there outside of the listing brokerage, then you can have that type of communication, but you're still responsible, for making sure the home seller gets what they need in terms of privacy, because that is why they decided to go with an office exclusive listing. And I think, you can think through how it is that you limit, how many people know about that property to ensure that the home seller's privacy is not undermined. Maybe it could be through letting the other broker know that they are not authorized to say anything about the property, to anyone else, including those within their firm. I think, you can think about the possibility of a non-disclosure agreement as well. But all of that, I think, is relying upon what the home seller is looking for and how it is that you're going to accommodate the home seller.
So the disclosures that you referenced, okay, so a seller is going to have to sign a disclosure form indicating that they understand what they're signing. Are those disclosure forms, have they been made up yet? Are they in the process? So seller, I'm going to do an office exclusive and I can share it with another company, or whatever, if I decide, or another agent within another company. So is that going to be a disclosure form that the seller is signing, and is that prepared? Isn't it going to be explaining?
So the disclosure form is something that the MLS would be responsible for, where in which the MLS can decide that you must use a specific form, or the MLS may say that you can use any form as long as it meets the disclosure requirements that's set forth in the MLS policy. And those disclosure requirements are: one, you have to disclose to the home seller the relationship that you have with the home seller. Are you a transactional agent? Are you a broker? Are you an agent and they're a client? Are you a dual agent, if that's allowed in your state? All sorts of things that are consistent with your applicable law in terms of your professional relationship. The other thing is that explaining to them the benefits that they would forego if they decide to, let's say, go with an office exclusive, making sure that they understand they're going to waive the broad marketing exposure that the MLS provides when it is listed as a regular listing, let's just say, lack of a better term. And then the other thing is that they need to confirm that that is the option that makes the most sense for them. So confirming their decision that it is them that is driving that decision and not someone else.
So if the MLS is going to have a disclosure form for these choices, is that what I'm hearing right now?
You would have to talk to your MLS about it. So some MLSs will require a specific form. Some will say that your broker or maybe someone else can develop that form for you to use, as long as it's consistent with the disclosure requirements in the policy.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a form that they're going to provide.
Again, it's something that you'll have to talk to your MLS about. They may provide you a form.
We're in New Hampshire now. Do we know what's happening?
We'll get to, Mary Jo, we'll get to that. It will
Okay.
become more clear, but thank you for your question. Jen, please.
Sure. Thank you. So I just had a question. So I know this isn't going into effect until September, but can brokerages get ahead of this now and start our policies and processes now?
So the September 30th deadline is the last day that the MLS has to implement the policy. MLSs can implement it before then as well. So I would talk to your MLS to find out when and how that they're going to implement it.
Okay, great. And then just to be clear on the forms, it is kind of what we just explained. And then for syndication, that still will remain in our New Hampshire contracts, or will that also have a separate form as well?
So with the DML opts out of IDX and syndication.
Okay.
If you're looking to just opt out of just syndication, that is a separate option that exists aside from the policy. And so you can certainly let the MLS know that I'm okay with it being an IDX, but I don't want it syndicated to XYZ site, where in which the MLS provides a syndication fee.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John, you're up next, and then Andy, please. Oh, John just went away. So Andy, you're up next.
I think John just needs to be unmuted, but I'll jump in and let him unmute. I've got a quick question, Charlie, and I appreciate you coming on today, but you had made a statement that it's okay for a listing agent to call a broker at another firm, or that broker calls and says, geez, I understand you listed 123 Main Street. I have a client who'd like to see it. And you said, well, we're going to stay with the office exclusive. We're not going to show it. Isn't that in direct violation of the code of ethics that we're going to cooperate with all realtors unless it's in the best interest, unless it's not in the best interest of our client?
That's correct, Andy. So I think that last part is the most important part. It's got to be in the best interest of the client. And so if the client is saying, Andy, that information that John is sharing to you is interesting, but it's not enough for me to change it from an office exclusive listing, then they are telling you that in my interest, I don't want others to be able to see it since they're outside of the listing brokerage.
Okay. I will finish with a statement, which is I think you're trying to thread a very tiny needle here with this. I appreciate the work that everybody at NAR has done, but it comes down to trying to protect clear cooperation, which I think you should probably give up on, but that's my soapbox.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Unmuted and ready to go. Thank you for your patience. Charlie, some of the work I do is an expert witness in litigation, and a lot of that has to do with chronology, steps of documentation prior to action, etc. And what I want to ask you is to see if what I understand so far is correct. And what I'm hearing is that in the process of listing a property, a real estate licensee / realtor should take certain steps. And that is first to provide this disclosure, which provides for the prospective seller the options that they have in terms of types of listings, the options that may be available in types of relationships, etc. And that's first step. Second to that, only after that's done, would be the actual creation of the listing through a a written brokerage agreement, a listing agreement, and that listing agreement would be one of the types that you've described, the office exclusive, the limited marketability, exempt, et cetera, et cetera. But until that has taken place, the disclosure to the understanding so that the seller is able to make a decision based on informed consent, followed by an actual written brokerage agreement, the realtor / licensee should not be contacting others representing or discussing the ways in which they can cooperate with the prospective listing broker on that listing. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so just starting from your last question and then moving backwards, yes, I mean, one, you need the legal authority to be able to have the authorization to represent the seller and the property. And that, when you're the listing broker, that's going to be the listing agreement. And so the listing agreement is what gives you that authority. In terms of, the disclosures and the informed consent, you want that confirmed. So that is correct. If a home seller is saying, I want an office exclusive or I want a delayed marketing exempt listing, you need to first have that signed certification before you can act accordingly. Now, in terms of the timing of when you have that discussion, I think that is a business decision. So I think, some may decide that they're going to present it as a part of the listing presentation. Some may decide to only present it if the home seller is indicating that they need something more in terms of privacy, or they need something more in terms of tailored marketing. Otherwise, I think, one can reasonably presume that the home seller is fine with it being in the MLS for broad marketing and exposure, because according to, everything that we've read and seen by others who've done studies, home sellers oftentimes are best served when it is in the MLS with broad marketing and exposure, because oftentimes it provides the best offer for the home seller. So what I would say is that these discussions should really be prompted by the home seller's interest. It shouldn't be pursuant to anything else other than the home seller's interest. But in terms of when it is that you have that conversation with them and how it is that you have that conversation, as long as you meet the requirements of the policy and applicable law, then those are business decisions.
Appreciate that. Quick follow-up just to confirm. I appreciate all of your encouragement of cooperative brokerage through Article 3, et cetera. I understand that. But just to confirm in terms of steps, it would be a business meeting with a prospective seller. Then, as is the timing for the seller and as is the proper discussion, the steps would require the disclosure first, and then the creation of the written brokerage agreement. That written brokerage agreement would contain as you say, legal authority for the listing agent to conduct the business on behalf of the seller, but within the prescribed form of business as established by what interaction they're going to have with the MLS and what interaction they're going to have with other brokers, correct?
I think that makes sense, John. I'm not familiar with how your listing agreement is set up, and so I defer to New Hampshire about that. But I think, yes, in terms of just the mechanics in how you described it, that all seems to make sense.
Yeah. In short, our listing agreement, our license law requires a written brokerage agreement in order to represent or conduct business on behalf of a seller.
Right. That's correct. Now, in terms of when you talk about the different, exempt listing options, that's, I think going to depend on what your law requires. I think it also should be predicated on what your home seller is telling you that they need in terms of the advertising and the availability of their property to others.
Understood, but I'm suggesting that until that's in place, the realtor does not have the legal authority to go out and start representing the opportunity to view or see this property to other brokers and or consumers.
That makes sense to me.
Thank you, John. Jen, here's our last question, and Jen, you'll take it away.
Sorry, just a follow-up. I apologize. So if somebody, like, we're getting those one-to-one communications and somebody's advertising an open house on that property, is that okay? That doesn't constitute public marketing?
So if they're inviting people outside of their listing brokerage firm, or in which, it's not agents affiliated with their listing brokerage or those clients and customers that are using that brokerage, then that would be public marketing.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Charlie, and for all of the great information. It was very informative. We're now going to move on to a forms and legal update with the New Hampshire Association of Realtors legal counsel, Matt Johnson. Good morning, Matt.
You're muted, Matt.
All right, we'll try that again. And I was brilliant while I was on mute. I just want to say, Charlie, thank you for that explanation. That was super helpful. We have until noon today, so I will, and Bob has a couple points as well. So this will be a little bit of a lightning round for me. Before we depart Charlie's presentation, I guess I would say my view from the risk management standpoint is please remember Charlie's point that this really has to be seller driven. And so I would say for our New Hampshire market, there is a very limited, in my view, very narrow market segment where these options really probably make sense. And they only make sense if you've had a robust discussion with your seller and it's clear that this is in the best interest of the seller and what they want. So these are options, but they're just options. To address Mary Jo's question, we are already working with our local MLS on a joint working group to come up with the disclosure form. And so we will be rolling that out in concert with the MLS. So that is in progress. Couple just risk management high points to remember while I have everybody here. First, remember, we seem to have a little bit of gap sometimes in recognition that the septic inspection rules have changed. Remember last fall, the rule changed and it is now a septic evaluation. It is now the buyer's obligation to do it. And it used to be if the property was within 200 feet of a lake or a body of water. Now it's if the system itself is within 250 feet. But remember, the buyer has to get a septic evaluation. That is from either a licensed septic evaluator or a septic designer. If the system fails, the buyer has 180 days to repair or replace the system. And understand as well that according to the Department of Environmental Services, that 180 days can be extended. So just remember, this is now a buyer obligation. The early feedback we had was also that one of the gating issues for these transactions is the fact there's not that many people licensed in various parts of the country, state that can do these inspections. So if you're the buyer agent and you have a property where this is going to be triggered, one of the first things you should be doing is getting that septic evaluator lined up, because the timing for that may drive the rest of the timing of what you need for your offer. Second point, the proliferation of artificial intelligence is not going anywhere. Remember that savvy criminals are now using AI for land fraud scams and trying to trick you, or wire fraud scams trying to take the money. So my message to you is to be ever vigilant in terms of talking to people, seeing people, reviewing people. It gets harder and harder out there. Trust your instincts. If you feel like something is not right, don't believe your instincts and take that seriously. And finally, it is the spring season. We're moving into the short-term rental season in the vacation areas of New Hampshire. I just want to remind everyone, cautionary tale, that there is a lot of flux in terms of whether short-term rentals are permitted or not in various locations throughout the state. So if you are selling a property or even representing buyers looking for a property, be very careful about what you say or don't say relative to the property's ability to be used for short-term rentals, because that is often an evolving and shifting landscape for various towns. Zoning amendments just happened in a lot of towns in March, so you have to be very careful. So what may have been permitted 2 years ago may not be, and vice versa. So just be very cautious. You should really be the source of the source and not the direct provider of that information. Help your buyer or your seller speak with people at the town so that they can be the ones that are providing information on that topic. And with that, unless I have any questions that I'll take quickly, I'll turn it over to Bob for a little bit of a legislative update.
I think Jennifer has a question. And if there's any others, just raise your hand.
I always have a question. I'm sorry, just because somebody asked me yesterday about the transferability with this backlog of getting these septic evaluations done. Does the seller have the ability to then in turn be proactive, get something done on their behalf? I mean, obviously it says the buyer's responsible for this, but could that be transferable?
I believe the seller could take that on themselves if they wanted to and try to get one. And I forget, I don't have the language right in front of me, but there is a window in the statute for how far back in time it could go, and it's considered to be good or compliant. So yes, the seller, if they know, like say 3 months from now, we're going to put the property on the market, the seller can take that step. I just forget the window of time where it remains
180 days.
good.
180, yeah.
Okay, so it's not a bad thing as a listing agent. It's not a bad idea particularly to maybe, if you think that's going to be a stumbling block to getting it sold quickly, to go ahead and do that.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you.
Mary Jo, and then Joni, you're on deck.
So just wanted to understand, you said a septic evaluator. So a septic company that's doing septic inspections is not a septic evaluator?
Correct.
No.
All right, go
It
ahead, Bob.
is. So, Mary Jo, generally
we're-
considering, can you hear me?
Yes.
Generally, I think the evaluator is what's referred to in statute. But I think commonly used within the industry is an inspector. So it's one and the same.
It is one and the same. So if this company that does septic inspections does a septic inspection, that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there was not another list somewhere.
No, they don't make it easy because they changed the words. They now call it an evaluator, but yes, Bob's correct.
Okay, thank you.
In New Hampshire, you either are a licensed evaluator or you're a licensed designer.
And
those are the
either
only
could
two.
do it.
Okay, Joni.
So I wonder when Matt said that there's a shortage of those evaluators, if possibly people are actually finding a shortage in the next step. If the system is older than a certain amount of time, a certain age, I think it's 1986 or 1989, Bob, you could say, then they have to have a licensed septic designer come out and find the high water mark to make
Correct.
sure that it's not in failure. So I wonder if that's what that folks are finding some trouble finding, because I think that inspectors or evaluators, there's a lot of them. I think most of us would wonder if you are having a hard time finding with those people.
I think some of that can be driven by what region you're in. I think there are, there are regional differences in terms of how accessible.
Julia. You have to unmute, Julia. Sorry.
Sorry about that. So I live on the lake, and there are the realtors that sell property on the lake that I live on. And I'm not sure if they're actually following through with this or making sure, like, how do we know this is really happening, that buyers agents are making sure the inspections are getting done and that all of this is being done properly? Is there something in MLS that shows, or a form that people sign that say they are actually doing this procedure?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, ultimately, the statute makes it be a buyer obligation. I don't know that it's a seller's obligation to check up on the buyer. The buyer closes and doesn't do it. I mean, the buyer may have ramifications from the Department of Environmental Services, but I don't see it coming back on the seller. Statute's clear now.
Okay.
We have had communications with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services where inspections were conducted, and then there was no follow-up with the department in terms of either a repair or replacement. And after 6 months, you have 180 days. And the Department of Environmental Services is planning on sending letters to those new owners, indicating that there is a requirement that they need to get the septic either repaired or replaced. So that's coming.
Great. Any other questions? Mary Jo, you have another question? Or is your hand still up?
I think she's muted.
You're muted, Mary Jo.
I can.
Okay.
Okay, so a follow-up question. So if a buyer does have an inspection on the septic system, what other requirements are they? Do they have to send that in to the state?
I believe it's a septic evaluator or inspector who has the obligation to send that into the state.
The evaluator, okay, has the obligation to send it into the
Correct.
state. Okay, okay.
And the town, both the state and the town have to be.
Okay, okay. And how do you know that that's being done? You would ask them, right?
Well, I mean, it's the buyer's obligation. It's not I mean, unless the lender or unless there's going to be some reason why it hangs up the closing, it's not to be blunt, but why the seller doesn't really care.
No, I'm talking on a buyer's end. So the buyer has it done, so they have a septic inspection. So it's not their obligation to make sure it's the licensed evaluator that's supposed.
Yeah, I mean, one of your roles is probably the sort of project manager for this whole exercise, is probably to make sure that the septic inspector did in fact make those filings so that you can check that box off.
Okay.
On the buyer side.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. I see no more questions. So thank you, Matt. We're now going to hear from NHAR CEO Bob Quinn, who will tell us what's going on at the State House this session. Welcome, Bob.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. So housing has certainly been a hot topic at the State House over the past couple of months, and we're still about a month away from the session ending. So a lot of moving pieces, but I did want to at least alert you to a couple of bills which have passed out of both the House and the Senate and are headed to the governor's desk for her signature. And one of those is House Bill 577. This has to do with accessory dwelling units. So hopefully you're aware of the current requirement in state statute that municipalities have to allow for an attached accessory dwelling unit. This 577 would allow for either an attached or a detached. You get one or the other. And instead of having to go through some sort of special exception or conditional use permit process, it would be by right. That bill has passed out of both the House and the Senate, and it's on the way to the governor's desk. She has, in the past, said positive things about this legislation. So we certainly anticipate that she will sign it into law. If she does, that's going to go into effect in July. And remember, it's by right. So it would have an impact immediately this summer. You should also be aware of another bill, House Bill 631. Similarly, is passed out of both the House and the Senate. This would allow a property owner to build a manufactured housing on any residentially zoned area in the state. So again, if that bill, we anticipate that bill will be signed by the governor and it will go into effect later this year. There are about a dozen other bills dealing with housing that are have passed out of either the House or the Senate. So we're not entirely sure all of them are going to make it to the governor's desk. So please do, we'll update folks on a weekly basis. And at the end of the session, we do provide everybody with a new laws booklet, which usually comes out around Labor Day after the governor signs all of the bills. So at least be aware of those pieces of legislation. And with that, I'll turn it back to Susan.
Any questions for Bob? Okay, then before we wrap up, I just want to spend the last couple of minutes to remind you about a few resources available to all New Hampshire realtors. The first is Forewarn, which was touched on. Many of you have probably already activated Forewarn, but if you have not, you can find the link to it at the top of our NHAR homepage at nhar.org in a big red bar. Forewarn is very simple to use and just serves as an extra layer of protection by providing instant identity, criminal, and property verification. If you want to make sure someone is who they say they are, this is a great tool for that. Also, remember that NHAR provides free monthly education the first Thursday of each month via Zoom. The next one is June 5th, called Risky Business with Monica McGillicuddy. And you can find the entire schedule at nhar.org/2025-education. And if you haven't already, please check out our monthly podcast, NHAR Getting Real, a half hour in short segments related to what's going on here and in the real estate industry. It's very easy to listen to during your car ride to an appointment. I listened to it on my way to Concord this morning. All the episodes, including the most recent with co-host Bill Whiteicher, can be found at nhargettingreal.org. And finally, I just want to make sure everyone is aware of the new fair housing requirement by NAR. This is in addition to the Code of Ethics training, and it's for anyone becoming a new member and for all members every 3 years. It requires everyone to take one of 3 courses, and the choices are Fair Haven, At Home with Diversity, or Bias Override. I appreciate you all being here this morning. We plan to host another broker forum at some point in the coming months. So please stay tuned as we have additional information on that. Have a great day, everyone. Great to see everyone.